Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is George Houston, and today we are here to preview the 2025 Austrian Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have a trio of Grid Talk's finest: Owain Medford,
Hello.
Louis Edwards,
Hello.
and Sophia Richmond.
Hi.
So, yeah, we're heading to Austria, the home race of Red Bull Racing this weekend for the round around the Spielberg track. For a change, actually, not a sprint weekend. It has been for quite a few years in a row, but not this time. Belgium has taken its sprint spot as it was for 2025. But let's start by talking about McLaren, Owain, because fair to say they rather went off the boil in Canada. We said how strong they were in Spain a few weeks before that. The regulation change didn't really seem to hurt them. It hindered them. Maybe that change actually was not helping them a lot around Canada, but was it more just a one-off with the unique characteristics of Canada? Or is that something that we can potentially expect to see this time around in Austria this weekend?
I think that luckily for McLaren and helpfully we're going away from the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, obviously, to the Red Bull Ring, and the track is fundamentally different. I mean, Austria is obviously characterised by a number of medium to high speed corners, and personally I think that's going to suit McLaren quite well. You have issues obviously at Canada where there's quite a number of slow speed corners, and as much as you've got quite a long straight, you would end up in a weird compromise where you've got to keep the downforce up, obviously, because there's kind of very little camber, as it's mostly it is just public roads. Obviously the Red Bull Ring is typically quite well, very high speed. It's one of the fastest laps in F1, and also being one of the sort of shortest laps in F1. And given that they are probably still the fastest car and have also quite good tire temperature management, I do think it's going to be a much better weekend for them. It's also more traditional as a circuit, and we've got to remember it's a circuit that they know how to go well at, and have done in the past. So I think that sort of those advantages are going to help them, particularly the tire wear advantage. We do seem to have very high temperatures with sort of no abatement of that with the geographical conditions of Austria, and so I think it's a good weekend on the cards for them. Though we will be able to get a better understanding whether the front wing change and things like that have actually impacted to a huge degree, or whether it was just a one-off. I don't think it's going to be a bad weekend for them. I think this is actually going to be a return to strength for McLaren.
Most likely, yeah, most likely. I mean, they do inherently have the fastest car in F1, and even the best cars over the years have got some little chinks in their armor. And with how unique of a track Canada is, it's not out of the realms of possibility. It's also going to be hot this weekend in Austria. I'm just looking at the weather forecast now. It's going to be touching nearly 30 degrees on race day. It's going to be wet on Friday, apparently, but Saturday and Sunday for qualifying and the race are going to be clear. So that better tyre wear, that better tyre temperature management is really going to come in handy for McLaren. But Louis, does Lando Norris need to change his kind of approach really to things? Because a bit like Canada, there's not that many overtaking spots in Austria. There's 3 DRS zones back to back, but really you've only got 2 spots where you can overtake into what is technically turn 3 and turn 4, the second and third braking zones around the track. It's quite narrow as well. And given how relatively close Norris and Piastri have been for most of the year, they're going to have to be a bit careful about how they go about a potential team battle here.
Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely been words in the McLaren camp after the Canadian Grand Prix just about how you do approach it, when you're racing your teammate. I mean, unlike most sort of inter-teammate like incidents we've seen in the past, this one is somewhat unique in the fact that it was, Norris immediately put his hands up, like while even still in the car, and admitted that it was his fault. And I'm sure he'll definitely not want to make that mistake again, because he knows at the end of the day, he knew straight away it was his fault. Oss is going to still continue to race as he did because, let's face it, Lando just made the wrong decision. And yeah, I'm sure it will impact on how he will choose to race Oscar if he's in that position again this weekend. And he has a little bit of history with Max, of course, last year, really having a tough time overtaking, even when he was in the superior car, and is a testament to how tricky it can be to overtake at Austria. But I'm sure words have been spoken amongst the McLaren team, and at the end of the day, while they are very, very comfortable in the constructor standings, being over like nearly 200 points. But no, sorry, it's about 200 points ahead of Mercedes. Obviously, they need their drivers performing well, and if Mercedes are going to try and stage a somewhat revival in the latter half of this season, they need to be both finishing the race and both finishing highly.
Yeah, and it's a track that always delivers in terms of action. It's very rarely dull around the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Let's have a look to the past. Let's have a look at some of our favourite memories when it comes to the Austrian Grand Prix, though, because Sophia, we've had 2 races a year, sometimes, most of the times in the past, in terms of sprint races being there. We also had, of course, I think it was the Spielberg Grand Prix, the Styrian Grand Prix for a good few years in the pandemic as well. It's a track we've raced around a lot in recent times in Formula One. But what are your favourite memories from this track over the years?
I mean, some of it is actually not even when it comes to actual racing. It's the track limits and the penalties. I mean, throwback to 2023 and also 2021 as well, with 2023 had over 1,200 cases that needed to be reviewed. It also sprung the legendary meme of the Ocon penalties after he received the 30-second one. I mean, there was 9 drivers that received at least one or more penalties. That's almost half of the grid as well. Outside of that, you also had 2014's Williams front row lockout as well. Don't think that's going to happen this weekend, but I think overall, there is on-track racing, but again, I think the track limits how wide people are going to go in the last 2 corners is going to be quite an interesting one. It's where it can make a difference, especially when you come into how close racing, even in qualifying and also in the actual race as well. Those 5-second penalties can make a difference of podium or not, or even points as well. So that's something to very much look forward to this weekend as well, because I'm going to be honest, we're going to have similar situations as well compared to the previous years when it comes to the different penalties given.
Yeah, and of course that race in 2023 just happened to be the one we did Grid Talk live in, and did it straight after the race pretty much. And a lot of the results that we said and talked about all changed because of that absolutely myriad of penalties we got. But yeah, it was fun doing that, of course. But we could have chosen a much more simple race to cover live. But hey, there we go, is what it is. But Owain, what are your favourite memories of Austria over the years? Because of course this is a track that goes way back to I think the 60s, 70s, back to the Österreich Ring days. It's been on and off on the calendar for quite some time, but it's found a very welcome spot over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I think, obviously before the show, I was just thinking about what I enjoyed about the circuit, and I think my best memories from it come from actually the mistakes that a number of drivers make, particularly qualifying. I think it's a circuit layout, and with the camber, and obviously it's built into the hillside. It means that it is actually very difficult for a number of for a lot of the drivers just to get it right. Downshifting on bumps. We remember Lewis Hamilton in 2014. Going backwards and losing his lap, or Nico Rosberg, I think the same year, also having an issue with the final or penultimate corner. So, it really was an issue, at least that for these drivers, and I think that's what. Obviously that's why I love the circuit, but I think it means that you happen to get like a load of different sort of a load of different challenges, and it throws it up year after year. So I have to say it's the drivers making mistakes mostly. Those are some of my favourite memories.
Yeah, and punishments for these mistakes are very much amplified because of the short lap time. It's the shortest lap, sorry, the quickest lap, I should say, in terms of lap time overall, just over a minute. I mean, if they kept developing these cars, I'm sure they'd be able to do it under a minute eventually. But yeah, we're getting the new regulations next year. But yeah, a lot of controversy over the years at Austria, Louis. I mean, some involving some of the guys that are still on the grid, some involving some who've left us since then, but quite a few controversial championship clashes, not least, of course, the one we saw last year between Lando and Max Verstappen. What are your favourite memories here over the years?
I think the most infamous one for me is Nico Rosberg's curious interpretation of track, what the track was going into turn 3 and just absolutely side-swiping Lewis on the final lap. There's always a fun one to think about, just because of how utterly ridiculous the driving standards from Nico Rosberg that day was. But honestly, my favourite memory kind of harks back to the pandemic era, and it was Lando Norris's first podium in Formula One. Of course, we got was it like the Strat 7 or whatever thing that he was being yelled at on the radio to use, and to do that epic last lap to make sure that the gap to Lewis was under 5 seconds. And yeah, it was a great moment. And I was just one of, after, the not having F1 for so long and with it all being kind of up in the air, just for that to happen in the first Grand Prix of the year was a really sort of uplifting moment for me. So that would definitely be my memory of Austria.
Yeah, it was an incredible race. The first race back in the pandemic times, and yeah, they all seemingly forgot how to drive. I think we only had 11 finishes out of 20 or something like that. All kinds of craziness happening. And that's the what this track can produce at the end of the day. It's very hilly, very bumpy in places. It's very difficult for these guys to get on top of it. But yeah, this is the Red Bull Ring. But can Red Bull get on top of their car this weekend, Sophia, for a good finish? Of course, Max Verstappen was well up there in Canada, second place for him, started where he finished. But of course, he's a guy who really can turn it on during qualifying. And around the Red Bull Ring, where the margins are so fine, where the differences are so slight, could he potentially get it on pole? And we see so often this season, if you get pole, you usually win, even if you're not necessarily in the quickest car.
100%. And even if he doesn't get pole, he's going to be in that like top five anyway, let's be honest. And he can move, doing great overtakes as well where possible on this track. He holds the record of all time for the most amount of wins, and it's come in this new era of racing in Austria since 2014. He has 4 race wins as well. So if there's any other driver to kind of not like to think about it, it is Max's. Like this is his track. Obviously, it's Red Bull's track as well. I think they have had some interesting situations recently. Obviously, we go back to Canada, we go back to a few other previous times as well. But I think it is any driver to put their car into gear, no pun intended, it's going to be Max in the Red Bull at the Red Bull Ring. Like going to be a given. I think in terms of second driver kind of coming into play, I'm not entirely sure how it's gonna go. It very much again is a Max dominated kind of style track. I think we might be pleasantly surprised with driver coming up as well into playing the second driver role for sure. But we'll see. Again, as well, it as you mentioned before, this is a track that punishes you for even the slightest mistakes as well. So I think after what happened last time in Canada, Max knows what needs to be learned and what needs to be improved. I think this is also kind of having that little bit of the break time as well will give him enough time to kind of reset and kind of push forward for the rest of the season as well. And to be fair, I think they can deliver actually a good race this weekend.
Yeah, I think they've got the potential to do that. Absolutely. They seem very good around some high speed tracks, and this is very much a high speed circuit. But let's focus on Tsunoda actually, Owain. We always talk about Max and in depth, and not without good reason. He's, rather good. He's won one or two races in the last few years or so. But I want to talk about Tsunoda because he's not scored in the last 3 races. And given the fact that relatively that Red Bull car, it's pretty much universally accepted. It's incredibly difficult to drive if your name is not Franz Hermann or Max Verstappen. Those mistakes or that lack of pace relatively or lack of understanding of how to get on, how to get everything out of that car, that could very much be amplified. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Q1, for example, the whole field be covered by a second. And, if you're half a second down on your teammate, you're at danger of getting knocked out even at that early stage.
Yeah, of course, and it's the kind of track that you need confidence, supreme confidence. You need to be riding the curbs. You need to be, riding the outside curbs at least on turn in and exit. You need to be going right between sort of everything. Right between, using all the road. You've got to be committing, and it's multiple corners, one after the other, particularly in the middle sector. So unfortunately, it's just I think it's going to be difficult for Tsunoda, and I think we're kind of going to see issues for him. To be honest with you, I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park, and I think it's going to probably threaten his seat, unfortunately. So, it's just going to add to the laundry list of evidence that I think Red Bull are going to struggle. Then again, I'd like to be surprised. I think that Tsunoda is typically quite an exuberant driver, and I think that benefits him in certain ways, and that could lend itself perfectly to Austria. But I think on balance, I think it's going to be a struggle because, as you say, as the field closes up, particularly with I think Mercedes are going to go well, for example, and as you say, Verstappen's probably going to do well. You could even have someone like Williams. It's a relatively low drag track, I would say. They could even come into play. And I think it's as you say, it's getting so tight that it's going to be a difficulty for him at least to make his mark and get out of the earlier qualifying sessions and to make it even to Q3.
Yeah, it could well be a difficult weekend for Tsunoda. I feel like he does need to score some points soon, though, unfortunately. Whether it was right or wrong, the pressure is going to mount up on him because of that. We just know how Red Bull work and how they're organised and everything. But yeah, a potential positive sign. I mean, this is a hell of a stat, this that Sophia's just put in our little chat here, that Franz's granddad, Hans, won the Austrian Grand Prix in 1966, back in the days of the airfielder track, which was not a very inventive one, but hey, they did host a race back there. But yeah, just a little shout out as well, if you don't mind us saying as well, guys, if you're enjoying this podcast so far, we really appreciate if you go and take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you're listening to the show and you're not currently subscribed to our YouTube channel, please consider us helping us out with a like and a subscribe. But yeah, let's talk about Ferrari next. Interesting weekend, to say the very least, for them in Canada last time out, Louis. It's very rarely not, of course. Hamilton relatively struggled thanks to, unfortunately, running over a groundhog during the race, and it unfortunately damages aerodynamics. Charles Leclerc could have done better than fifth potentially, but again, the Ferrari strategies were out in force. So what are we thinking for this weekend for these guys? Because they do seem to do well when it's hot, and it's going to be hot in Austria this weekend. So that could lend itself to the car.
Yeah, it did. We have times where the Ferrari car does seem to perform incredibly well, just kind of out of the blue when the conditions are just right. But sometimes we have to think about the people outside of the car, necessarily inside the car too. Ferrari is an odd team. Is often memed about their strategy, and honestly, at times this season they've got it spot on. You think Fred Russell, he's got the team clicking, and then it goes all completely horribly wrong, and all the memes resurface, and it's good old Ferrari, never know what they're doing. You know, you have the drivers shouting at their engineers, and just everything's going awfully again. And regardless of whether the car's performing or not performing, it just seems to always something tends to like creep its way in and spoil the fun. But yeah, I mean, I never really know what to predict with Ferrari. It's all very kind of haphazard, and I mean, I'd like for them to finally hit the ground running. It would make things a little bit more interesting. And if the weather forecast holds for the next week and we do end up getting conditions that suit that Ferrari, then I can see them really taking the fight to maybe the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull. But is it going to be enough to beat the McLarens? Maybe not. It really is dependent. But if they get a good qualifying position, you know, somewhere high up the grid, I'm definitely not expecting them to win the race, but I think a podium could definitely be on the cards.
Yeah, it's definitely possible with Ferrari. I think in the most simplistic terms, the only team that can really beat McLaren or McLaren, if McLaren show up and for whatever reason their car's not performing 100%, that's the only realistic way for someone to comprehensively beat them. And even then, it's very rare, as we've seen so far this season. They're absolutely bossing it in terms of the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, Austria, strange one for the two drivers really at Ferrari. You've got Leclerc, who's the only guy not driving a Mercedes or Red Bull in the modern era to win round this track. You've also got, though, Lewis Hamilton's only won here once, Sophia, in the Austrian Grand Prix anyway. He might have won the Styrian Grand Prix, I'm not sure. But in the Austrian Grand Prix, he's only won once, which by his standards is really, really bad. You know, he's won like 3-4 times pretty much every track. But this seems to be a bit of a bogey circuit for him. So what are you thinking for this weekend for the Ferrari guys?
I was literally about to use that exact same term, very much so. I mean, yes, he did also win in 2020 at the Australian Grand Prix. So technically 2 wins on the track, but obviously it's not the Austrian Grand Prix. In all honesty, I'm kind of just expecting him just to have a race where he's not going to challenge, but it's just more kind of being the consistent, working on that relationship with the team as well, making sure good calls are coming. To be fair, I can see him being a second driver and supporting Charles, especially when it comes to qualifying, to give the tow and the push to help Charles. I know it's controversial, but the thing is, this is a track that he's not consistent in as well. Obviously he's won a race, he's also been off podiums, he's not placed. I believe he's had at least one DNF as well. Like this is very much a convoluted track for him. So why not have your other driver who is slightly more consistent-ish in the last couple years of racing? Why not push him forward to help in the constructor standing. Driver standing is a different story. I think for him this weekend, it just needs to be a good weekend where head down, not put a mistake in, and see if they can support the team in other way possible as well. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one as well. Like looking at his like looking at Lewis's career as well. Like this is the most oddest one in his entire history as well. It's the least amount of race wins where possible as well, and just overall performance and converting points to wins as well is very, very low compared to other tracks. So I'm not expecting much, but again, I can be pleasantly surprised as well. Anything could happen at this race, let's be honest as well. We can see different race winners that have been unpredicted to take a win as well. And especially with how close and narrow these cars are and how tight they are in terms of qualifying as well. Anything can really happen.
Absolutely. Anything can happen, and it usually does in Formula One. But let's talk about our most recent race winners, Owain. Mercedes, a double podium for them in Canada, which, going off of our predictions league, nobody went for. No one thought was really going to happen. It was such an unlikely result, but hey, they managed it. George Russell got pole position again, converted it. Kimi Antonelli got a podium, his first podium in Formula One, only one of 3 drivers to get a podium in Formula One being a teenager. And of course, they did win this race last year as well, albeit mainly because Lando Norris and Max Verstappen came to blows. But they still won it. So how do you think they're going to get on this weekend? Because again, difficult conditions in terms of the temperatures and stuff for them. It is something that Mercedes do struggle with, but it wasn't exactly that cold either in Canada, if memory serves. It was definitely bright and sunny. So maybe they can do something again this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more positive of a sort of outlook for Mercedes compared to last year. I don't think they're going to be running around a third and pick up a race win. I think I've just got this quiet level of confidence about them. I think they tend to work at sort of higher speed tracks a little bit better, and Antonelli and Russell, the two of them are obviously a great combination and one of the stronger 2 driver combinations in Formula One right now. And I've got this feeling I don't think they're going to be fighting so much with McLaren and Verstappen, let's be honest. I do think they're going to be above Ferrari, but I think the track suits them, and it suits the characteristics of the car that they've built the last number of years and this year as well. I think it's going to be a stronger weekend for them, and I think we could rather than just seeing one Mercedes pick up an unlikely win. I do think we're going to see at least them being in the fight, which I think is much more positive. And it just seems that the characteristics of this track, just kind of suit them a little bit more. And the car seems to suit it. They seem to have got a bit more on terms, given that early sort of development phase of the season, with how to get the best out of the car, at least from that perspective. And I think in that respect, I think it's going to be a good weekend for them. I don't think it's going to be great. I think they'd be unlikely to get the win. So I'm sure that we'll be heralding Antonelli getting his first. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great weekend for Mercedes. And I'd love to be proved right, to be honest.
Well, we'll see. You might have to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, when it comes to the predictions later. We'll see what you really think about Mercedes then. But Louis, what do you think about Mercedes this weekend? Because not in terms of pace, obviously that was pretty much very impressive in Canada, to say the very least, but more in terms of reliability. There's still question marks around that power unit, which for the longest time was absolutely bulletproof. The only team that seems to be kind of reverse to Mercedes engine trouble is McLaren so far. All the other teams have had issues, not least, of course, Mercedes themselves having 2 retirements for Antonelli in 3 races in that triple header. So around a track where obviously you've got to use the curbs quite a bit. It's very high speed. It's going to be hot. I think we've seen some mechanical issues from Mercedes over the years as well. I seem to remember Bottas had an engine failure. I could be imagining that, but I seem to remember that from back. You're nodding, so that's a good sign. But yeah, what do you think about Mercedes coming into this weekend?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head, because exactly what I was going to say. It's like, even though this Mercedes has been bulletproof, famously in the sort of V6 hybrid era, Austria was always this track that seemed to be their undoing. It was with the high temperature, high vibration, this kind of mix of things. Also, not to mention the high altitude, being up in the mountains, tends to mess around with this Mercedes engine, causing a lot of cooling problems and just not allowing them to output the maximum that they usually can, and it's why we saw a lot of race wins from Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari, and in the past here it's not always been a Mercedes dominated track in this era. And I think that's definitely something that will play on the mind of Mercedes, especially in a season where they haven't had as strong as an engine package as they usually have. How will this mix of high temperatures, if we get that on Sunday, a lot of vibrations from the curb, the high altitude, it's definitely something that they're going to be considering. And if they end up get stuck behind another driver for a long period of time, that dirty hot air coming from the car in front just causes even more issues. You know, this car may be great on a Saturday when they're in clear air or in practice, but it's going to come down to it if this car is in the hot, turbulent air of other cars in a big DRS change, which often happen in Austria. We do kind of get these big, long DRS trains. How is the Mercedes going to fare in that? And that could be a point of concern. You know, as Owain mentioned, like early on in the show, like the track characteristics between Canada, where this Mercedes was very strong, and Austria, you know, it's fundamentally different. And while their pace in Canada was great, it could see them kind of drop off. And then if they drop off, they're in the turbulent air. They're in there's where problems can come up. And I mean, obviously, for Mercedes' sake, hopefully they've brought enough cooling and fans to make sure that car doesn't set on fire, as we have seen in the past. Carlos Sainz will tell you.
Yeah, of course, that was a heartbreaking one for Sainz in 22, I think, something like that. So yeah, not a good one for him at all with that. But we'll see how Mercedes get on. Definitely under pressure in terms of everything that their power units and the cars have to get on with there. But under pressure potentially too for Franco Colapinto coming into this one, Sophia. This is officially the fifth and final race of his current contract to race with Alpine. Different sources saying there's no chance that he's going to be replaced. Some people saying that he's not really improved that much on doing before him. But what do you think? Because Alpine, as we've seen over the past few years, is predictably unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, if it's not Franco, who's gonna take that seat back? Would it be doing? Is it even allowed that Paul Aaron could move up as well? Because obviously there is a limit of the amount of driver switches as well per season. So the question is, if it's not Franco, who else? But I mean, yeah, there's pressure in general, and also given in recent weeks, obviously the light of social media from his said fan base as well, and how the reactions have been to other drivers from said fan base, I think also has some kind of pressure to Alpine as well, because as we've seen both Formula One, Formula Two, Formula Three, and also a lot of commentators and other drivers taking a stand on social media about the online harassment and abuse drivers are getting if they are being slightly wronged. Franco's either wronged them or vice versa as well. That's not okay as well. So I think that also has a factor, not just his driving as well, because that is not good for sponsorships, for publicity, and all that. But looking to his actual driving, I've just double checked this because I wanted to make sure I was right when I said this. Franco has a good race record at Austria as well in Formula 3 and Formula 2. Last year, he was on the podium for this feature race in P2 with fastest lap, and then he qualified, I believe, fourth as well. So to move up a good two places as well in the race, that's good. Sprint race, not so much, but was still close to the points. Go back to 2023, he was just off the podium for the feature race. So he has done consistent points. Formula 2 is a different kind of story. But I think this is actually quite a good one for him. I think this is also going to kind of prove that it's a track that he knows a lot better as well, because this is the thing, similar to with Lawson as well. They're putting him in tracks that he doesn't have as much familiarity as well. So Austria, I think, is probably his last shot to kind of given that this is a track that he has raced quite well in and a few years on. If he doesn't produce well, then yes, there is going to be more questions to say, will he stay? But again, I don't agree it being like the 5 lap kind of contract as well. Like, I don't agree with these driver changes at all. Because the thing is, you're signed for a year. Like, that is someone's livelihood. That is also other people's livelihoods as well with whatever the drivers bring up. You got catering, you have your PT, you have your own media team or whatever. If those drivers change, that's a loss of funding for other people as well. And I don't understand how it's so easy for these teams to kind of chop and change and think it's okay as well without understanding probably the knock-on effects of that to not just the drivers' lives, but everybody else's lives as well. So we'll see. I mean, if it is not a good weekend for Franco and there is discussions about him being changed up, I don't see anybody else coming in. That's the thing because doing they got rid of him, they dropped him down in the first place. Paul Aaron, is that even allowed? Because that's three drivers in the same seat in one season without mitigating reasons, which I don't think is allowed according to the FIA rules. I could be wrong. I know it's obviously 1 to 2 driver changes per seat, but three, that's a different story. And also, Paul's doing very well in the was doing very well in the lower seasons as well, and maybe that he's not ready for it. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not expecting a podium, let's be honest, but I think he could finally get some points, and I think that's probably the best possible outcome for him is to finish probably P10 or P8, where that's his highest finish that he's finished in Formula One, but that was last season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he does need some points. And I also agree. I think they should stick with him. I feel like these rookies should be, or these inexperienced drivers, because it's technically his second season, but, I think these drivers should be given a proper chance. You can't go chopping and changing it. It doesn't work. But we're also asking Flavio Briatore to be considerate and reasonable and care about other people. He's not a man who's done that historically, as we know, as we've said many times on this channel. So, yeah, there we go. But let's talk about our predictions. Let's think about what we are going to go for in terms of our predictions. It's tight at the top in the predictions table. I think it's like 2-3 points between me, Tom, Sophia, and Aaron's like shot up there as well. So it's high pressure. Big pressure coming into this one. Owain, what are your predictions for this weekend? Top 3, pole position, and the bowl prediction as well, please.
Okay, so I think I'm going to go with Piastri. I'm just going to predict Piastri at first because I'm smart. I've learned my lesson after not predicting McLaren in the early part of the season, and then I'm going to go for second. I'm going to go for Russell, and then I'm just going to put Verstappen there because you can't ever count the guy out in third. Pole, I'm going to have to give Piastri. And bowl prediction, oh gosh. Antonelli first win. There we go. I'm going for it.
He's edging his bets.
I always hedge my bets. Or if you don't hedge your bets.
Yeah, gamble responsibly, everybody. Louis, what are your predictions for this weekend? Top 3, pole, and the bold.
Well, as I am doing less than good in this, I feel like I need to switch it up. But also, then I'm like, why should I switch it up? Because if I switch up and it all goes horribly wrong, then it just makes me look more stupid. And then actually, Ruby might actually overtake me, and that terrifies me. So, my pole position, I'm gonna go with Oscar Piastri. I've generally usually gone Norris, but for a while now, I've kind of kept it with Piastri. And then for my podium, I'm going to go with Piastri to win. I'm going to go Norris P2 with Leclerc P3. And then bold prediction, Lance Stroll in Q3. I'm going extremely bold. I think it's bolder than Owain's.
That is rather bold, to say the very least, with how Lance Stroll has been getting on recently, to say the very least. But yeah, Sophia, what are your predictions?
Well, as back on top of the leaderboard again, only by 1 point, but still back on top.
It counts. It counts.
It counts. It's fine. Yeah, I'm gonna play it safe, and it's similar to actually Owain's one, but slightly different. I think pole will be Max. I think podium will be Max, then Oscar, then George, and then my bold is Franco getting points. So I had to be done. Obviously, I was slating him a little bit towards the end, but obviously the positive that he needs the points, I'll back him.
Took my bold prediction there. There's no points on it, but there's pride, so I have to think of another one while I'm also doing mine. So I'll go relatively boring. I feel like after a chaotic and topsy-turvy Canadian Grand Prix, we'll be back more to the mold that we've seen quite a bit in 2025. So I'll go with Piastri on pole, Piastri to win, Norris in second, and Max Verstappen in third. Bold prediction. Let's have a look. You know what? I mean, given his results in the last 2 races, it shouldn't be bold, but I think given the pace of the car, it is. Hulk for the points again. 3. He's already done it twice in a row in that Sauber. So round Austria, you never know. The man seems to pull off some absolute miracles in what some people rather uncharitably call a black and green tractor. But yeah, we'll move on from that. Oh, Wayne, anything you want to plug in terms of the socials for Grid Talk before we sign this one off?
Absolutely. If you'd like to keep up with the whole table, I noticed that you forgot to mention the bottom of the table. Where people like Aaron, have people from below Aaron Harper downwards are living. That's Tom Horrocks and I, Ruby. Then you can keep up to date with that on our Grid Talk social channels. Oh, sorry, I apologise, Louis, I forgot you. You can find
I'm
that
also
at
doing terribly.
I just thought I'd be charitable. You can find that at Grid Talk UK on all the social media services with the @. That's at Grid Talk UK. Yeah, it shows all the rules and the reasons that we've been terrible thus far, and you can look back at how awful we have been, and the reason that some of us are sitting on such few points, like myself.
Speak for yourself, mate. I mean, I only mentioned the top people. It's like the old school Champions League race back in the day in the Premier League. It's all about the top four. That's what it's all about, baby. So yeah. But, yeah.
Derby County for the win.
Grid Talk's very own Derby County.
That's so uncharitable.
Hey, Derby would kill to be in the Premier League right now. But let's stay on topic. Let's stay on Formula One. But yeah, Louis, anything you want to plug?
I guess the only thing I really have left to plug would be to please go check out our Gorilla Grid Talk series, which is now concluded. It concluded. The last episode came out a couple of weeks ago, but you can go back, watch all of our rounds now from rounds 1 to 5 and see how all of these wonderful people got on in my little quiz, and I'm very much looking forward to doing it again next year.
That smile has me very concerned, but it'll be a lot of fun, I'm sure. Yeah, you can go and watch the whole thing, the whole round 1 to 5, over an hour long of footage all in one. So if you take pleasure in others' misfortune, that's a great place to go. Sophia, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find myself and George with Formula Reports, where we cover everything, not just F1, but F2, F3. We also have Formula 2 and Formula 3 coming back this weekend as well. So it'll be quite a really good race weekend all around as well. So you can find it on all social media reports and also on the website Formula Reports.
Thank you very much. Yeah, busy old weekend for everybody covering the F1, 2 and 3 in Austria. But yeah, if you want to see more from Grid Talk, we are of course available on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal and Pocket Cast. Just search for F1 Grid Talk for our big back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for more exclusive content, including our Beyond the Grid Talk exclusive Patreon podcast as well. Also, make sure that you subscribe so you're first to see when each new weekly episode goes live, and we will be back very soon with plenty more F1 content. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, everybody, and goodbye.